Welcome everyone to Sharing Soulful Stories, and today I'm here with Sabrina Lynn. Welcome, Sabrina.
Oh, thank you so much, Joe. It's so great to be here. I love what you are doing.
Oh, yay. I'm so glad you're here. And now I'm just going to tell everybody a bit more about what it is that you do and why we're excited to have you here. Sabrina Lynn is the founder of ReWilding For Women, and she has had a profound impact on thousands of women across the globe. She is one of the most provocative, raw, and passionate personal development trainers in the world, known internationally for her unique workshops on spiritual growth, reclamation of the divine feminine, and the awakening path that is unique to women. Sabrina has designed and developed remarkably effective transformational practices that address awakening in mind, body, and heart. She brings her 12... I love it.
No pressure then. So no pressure then. Who wrote this thing?
How good is that? How good is that? I'm going to keep going though, because it says now you're bringing together your 12 years of teaching, speaking, facilitating, and coaching experience to your work. Taught at some of the largest organizations in Australia, has studied, practiced, and taught archetypal psychology, neuroscience, leadership, shamanism, energetic healing, meditation, astrology, tantra, physiology, and mind-body connection, and hosts a popular weekly ReWilding For Women podcast and leads international audiences through ReWilding For Women workshops, retreats, and online programs. Yay.
That is a mouthful.
That's awesome, because in a way, like, the rest of this conversation isn't hugely about what you do unless it's totally intertwined with the rest of your story.
Awesome.
You know,
awesome.
I want people to know all of this amazing stuff. And so, as you know, we're here to talk about spirituality. And my favorite first question for everybody is, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I love that question. And I think it's so interesting to answer this question, Joe, because there are so many dogmas and so much around the semantics of talking about the divine, talking about spirituality. Or I know that like 80% of people hear the word God and they just go, and they recoil, and they're this like, no, almost
honestly, that was me at one point. That word just triggered something in me. It was really
and so I want to talk about it from a very, very open, very broad standpoint, in the hopes that we don't trigger those deep wounds. So a lot of times it's actually deep trauma from these paths and experiences we had, not just in this life, but past lives and through our family lineage and all of those things. So in an effort to not trigger all of those things, to me, spirituality is a path of getting to know thyself, getting to know thyself. Every spiritual master will say that is the path. Know thyself, know thyself, know thyself, know thyself. The heights of self, the depths of self, peeling back all of the layers that are not you, authentic you, true you, to almost come to a place to know yourself as the divine. Not just read it in a book and go, oh, I've heard that I'm a piece of the divine. That's fantastic. But to know it, to step into that, to live from that place, or to walk the path toward living from that place of the embodiment. For me, spirituality isn't just stepping outside of ourselves and touching into what we feel is divine. It's actually the embodiment of the divine into our daily lives, into our bodies, our physical bodies, like bringing the divine into physical life. And that's part of the feminine belief system and part of the feminine path that you kind of mentioned a little bit at the beginning. But to me, that's one way of describing spirituality. I could describe it 20 other ways though, Joe, but I think that's just the one that comes through in this moment.
But I love that. And I just feel that is, in all the different ways that people have described it, there is that thread that is running through each of them. So that is a really beautiful way to, you know, how a simple explanation, just know thyself. And there are a lot of ways that we can do that. Which I'm sure
talk about this stepping into fullness, stepping into allness, stepping onto our soul's path, opening up to the soul and the gifts of the soul. And so know thyself, it's not a mental thing. It's not at all one of those like, oh, just, do some mindfulness practices. It's actually opening up to our spirituality, opens us up to places that we don't even know exist within self. We don't even know that these places exist. We don't know that these gifts within us exist. We don't know that this connection to spirit, divine, God, our soul, whatever we're calling it these days, it exists.
Oh, seriously, I'm so there. Because when you can feel it and you know it, and I mean, I'm not enlightened, I'm not living in it all the time, but there's experiences of it. You're like, oh, this is what these people are talking about. So thank you. Yes. And the embodiment piece, I agree, such a huge part of it. My next question for you, though, is which I will be really curious about is, has spirituality always been part of your life? Or has there been some sort of triggering event or anything that's drawn you into this path?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question, Joan. I would say there was definitely an event which really woke things up in me. And it was almost, at the time when it happened, I really only had the path, the Christian path, kind of that as a framework. And so for me, it was, oh my God, I got the call from God. I'm going to have to be a nun. Joe, that's legitimately what I thought. Like legitimate in my 20s, I had no reference for any other world religions or traditions or spiritual containers or paths. I had nothing other than the tiny little bit that I was taught as a child in Sunday school. And it was that deep inner knowing of, I got the call, and I had no idea what that meant. I just knew that I had the call. I remember I was living in the woods by myself in a tiny little cabin in Wisconsin. That was when it happened. And I remember running through the woods in the pouring rain, crying my eyes out, Joe, thinking like, oh my God, I have to be a nun. I'm going to have to be a nun. This is terrible. Clearly, I figured it out that I didn't have to be a nun, but that beginning of trying to fit it into a framework was so, I want women listening, I want men listening, that there's so much more than the frameworks that you might originally feel into, or you might be at or be thinking like, oh, it has to look like this, or but also I did have a lot of inklings towards the divine as a child, towards spirit as a child. But I hid it. I hid it from my family. I hid it from everyone. I hid it. I absolutely hid it up until literally probably 5 years ago. I completely hid that aspect or I thought I was hiding it.
Yeah.
Everyone else kind of saw, but there was a lot of trauma around the spiritual path that I had to work through. A lot of trauma around being seen, around just that like really deep, some of those like really, really deep unconscious fears around being persecuted for it, all of those different things that come with, especially with the feminine path, right? It would be one thing if I was just like, hey, I do want to be a nun. That's cool. But it's not that. It's like the feminine path of let's reclaim our power and our Shakti and our gifts, our divine gifts as witches, as medicine women, as priestesses, right? And so, yeah, it was a really wild journey. And so it was always kind of there, very quietly and very, very, very hidden until the big awakenings happened, and then really couldn't hide it.
Love it. Oh, and you touched on so many great things there, and I'm looking forward to asking more about them. I just was going to just hold that concept of these frameworks, and that can feel certainly to me was like really restrictive. Like, how do I explore this thing, but I don't feel aligned to that, or I don't feel it doesn't fit in that box over there. I actually just want my own concept of it, and I'm feeling this and I'm feeling that, but what is that? What is it? So I thank you for that that freedom and that idea of kind of hiding it. I feel that there's, you know, that I think that's going to resonate with a lot of people. That, like, what will my family think of this, and what would that, because I'm not going down that path that they went down, or whatever that might be.
Well, and how often do people say, I've just gone to a yoga class or a meditation class, when that's not at all what they're doing, right? They're like bringing in divine light. They're like, yeah, family, I was just at a yoga retreat. But it's so common. It's so common. So yeah, I'm really glad that we were able to touch on that, and to let people know they're not alone. They're not alone. And there is wisdom in flying under the radar too. So I also want to say that there is wisdom and there is a divine timing as to when we have the soul stamina to come out in family systems, to come out in our communities. It is building up that muscle, that soul stamina, to be able to stand in these beliefs that others around us maybe don't have.
Yes, thank you. And potentially not having the words even for it when you're first exploring it. Like, how do I even explain what this is to someone else? So, you know, it can totally be, I don't need to go and tell everyone about this right away. It's my journey for now. And yeah, so thank you so much for sharing that. What I would love to ask you next, though, you've touched on awakening moments and this particular moment in the woods, but how has it all unfolded? You know, what highs and lows would stand out for you that might connect with people and resonate for them? Or just interesting.
Yeah, no, that's a beautiful, I'm trying to feel into what would be most useful to share. I would say this part of the story is usually relatively useful. I had a really intense awakening, that my very first intense awakening, and it was a top-down awakening. Mm-hmm. So I kind of work in the tradition where it's two different sort of forms of the divine coming in. It's the divine, you can call it divine masculine and divine feminine, or Shiva and Shakti, and those are just, it's just a framework. It's just a way of us humans trying to like come up with a way to explain the unexplainable. Mm-hmm. But when you get to the higher, purer forms of it, it's just straight up raw divine light that comes down in a very straight line through the crown chakra, all the way down the central channel. That was my very first awakening, was in that fashion, and came in so intense, so wildly that it knocked me out. It came in, it knocked me out. I ended up on the floor in front of 200 people, drooling. There was drool coming out of my, I'm laying on the ground shaking. And my first thought when I came to was, have I peed my pants? I didn't pee my pants, that was good. I had no concept of what happened, what was happening to me. So I share that because this path can be it can be scary. It can be very scary. And that was a very scary time for me. Someone handed me a book and said, you just had a shamanic initiation. I didn't even know what the word initiation was, Joe. I was still that girl running in the woods thinking I had to be a nun. I didn't understand shamanism. I had no concept. I thought I was having a seizure. So when this happened to me, it was with the shamanic woman, and definitely in the shamanic tradition, but I had no concept of it. And so to leave the mind in this place, right? It's rattling for the ego. The ego has a lot of times for those on this path, it'll happen without us having the mental food to kind of chew on, which this sounds crazy, but what I've witnessed and what I've experienced in myself and in the paths of hundreds of others is it's perfect that way. Like this path cannot be laid out more perfectly for each individual in the way that it comes, the way that the awakenings happen, the way that the openings happen, whether they're intense or they're more subtle. It cannot be more perfect. It is so incredibly perfected for your unique being and your unique experience and what your soul came here to do and how your soul came here to experience spirituality and this life, it cannot be more perfect. But we don't know that. And we go into, so often we go into these places of just like terror, like what is happening to me? And I definitely hit those places. I didn't have a teacher. I didn't have, for a very good portion, little teachers would come in here and there in my life, and then they would disappear. So I've never really been a part of one particular path. It's been a huge conglomeration of a lot of different traditions and a lot of different paths. And to me, it's been amazing because it's taught me trust in the divine. It's taught me and shown me that that's my teacher. That's the teacher to go to, not a human form. For sure, there are beautiful human forms of teachers, and we need them, and they're wonderful, and they open doors, and they give, that's their service to the world. That's their dharma. That's what they're here to do. That's how they're here to let the divine come through them. So I know that's been, so I'll just share a tiny little bit more, Joe. I'm sorry.
Please.
I just want to like kind of close the circle. So those top-down awakenings, for lack of a better word, probably came for about 2 years. And they would wipe me out. So they would wipe me out, like absolutely wipe my whole system out and wipe me out as almost like really tough to be in this world, really challenging to be in this world, because they would open and awaken so much. And it was just this walking around in oneness. It was a oneness with God. And I would be just off the planet, for lack of a better way of saying that, just with God. And not really knowing how to go to a cafe with my friend and have a conversation, because I'm gone. Yeah. Then what happened a couple of years later was bottom up awakening happened. So that, just as a framework of talking about Shakti, the divine feminine, that opened up in me. And that shifted everything for me, because that then could hold in a different way. So the light that came in from the top now had an actual like container or connection into earth, connection into life, connection into my body that could hold that much light coming through, that much grace, that much divinity, that much of a connection to the divine realms, to the spiritual realms. And I wouldn't get fried out. I wouldn't be off the planet where I couldn't communicate with others. I just had the hard time being in this physical world. So that's been my path. And those have been my awakenings, is really honoring both the divine masculine, or that straight line, grace-filled light coming up, and the kundalini, or the Shakti that rises up from the bottom. To me, that kind of explains a whole lot of things. But definitely answers the question of intense moments. And that the bottom up, when that happened, that was pure love and bliss and joy. So when the feminine awakened in me, I was a love bomb for probably 2 months, just in love with everything in this world. Where the other one took me to be in love with the divine and to almost leave this world. This one was I see the divine in that tree. I see the divine in that person. I'm in love with that person, in love with that tree. I was in love with traffic lights and cars in downtown. I was in love with everything, just like exuding love and light everywhere in this. So it was very much an embodied experience when that opened.
Oh, I love that. Those are particularly intense ones for anybody that's going, yikes, that's not where I want to go. That sounds really cool. But, I know at the same time what you're talking about, but my experience has been much gentler and slower and softer.
So I'm so glad you're sharing that. And I think it's definitely worthwhile pointing that out. That's my unique path. And that's my dharma. Like that was my awakening to what I was meant to do in this world, which is to channel a whole lot of light, a whole lot of grace, and open up a whole lot of doors for people. And it's not that intense. For some, it's that intense, but it's not that intense. Like so I love that you're talking about that. And that's the other thing is this really if I can share just a tip, is don't judge your path. Don't judge your path. Don't compare it. We cannot compare this to anyone else. We cannot compare like, oh, Joe's path is so much better than mine. Why can't I be awakening like she is? Because you're not supposed to. Yeah. That's not your soul truth. That's not your path. That's ego. Get the ego out. Get the mind out of the way. Get those judgments and those comparisons. Just let them go. Let them go. It's divinely perfect for you. But yeah. So I'm so glad you brought that up, Joe. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And I love that you've just shared that too. I love that because it's so different. And that was one of the sort of flavors I wanted to share with people through all these interviews. Like, they're so different. And yet everybody has embraced spirituality as a path, this is something I want to continue to explore. I'm not enlightened. I'm not there yet, but I know there's some good stuff here. So I'm going to keep going. Because I certainly could, I know when I first started exploring, I feel it was more of that top down. And I whilst not as intense as the way it came for you, I do remember feeling like I can only feel connected to the divine, like while I'm in meditation. How do I bring this to the world? And it was embodiment that allowed me actually to be like, this is now how I show up. This is not just while I'm lying, sitting here in meditation and feeling it in my body, but I didn't know how to bring it. I'm still not great with my children. I'm going to be totally honest. I go into ego all the time with them, but it's a work in progress.
Absolutely. That's the path. That's the path, right? That's the path. If you weren't a work in progress, you would be enlightened or dead.
That's it. And my son has been gifted to me as a constant reminder of, okay, we've got a lot of work still to go here.
Oh, it's so beautiful. That little teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And so what I would love, because you, we touched on at the beginning when we did when I read through your bio, all these things you do, what does it look like for you? Sort of more practically, how are you weaving spirituality through your life, through your work? How is it showing up more in a people can practice or feel into what looking through your window might look like?
Yeah. So probably, I know that this might take us a little bit out of the practical, but I'll try to bring it down into practical. For me, it's I call it following the energy, following Shakti. I live my life in constant, it sounds crazy, but almost in constant prayer, constant communication with the divine, with Shakti, with my body, with my soul, with I'm constantly reading, constantly feeling, where am I being called? What's the highest in this moment? How can I, where am I being guided? How can I make this decision? And this is Joe, this is becoming every part of my life. It wasn't always like this. It was a couple of years ago, I said to myself, wow, when I facilitate a workshop or facilitate a retreat, nothing else exists other than following Shakti, right? Following the divine, and Shakti is just the embodiment of the divine. It's just one way of saying it. And it's following the energy, following Shakti. Where are we being called? Where is the circle being called? What practice are we being called to do? I go into every single retreat and every single workshop with no agenda. Joe, I have no idea what's coming in the next minute. No clue what's coming, what meditation, no clue what practice, if there's an archetypal energy that's coming. I have no idea. Because if I did, I would be limiting the absolute bigness of the divine, the absolute miraculous nature of the divine, and the fact that it changes every single moment, right? Every single moment. There have been a billion decisions that have been made in this world, and now the whole of everything is different. And to live from this place is wild and intense and insane, and it's certainly not for everybody. But 2 years ago, I was facilitating workshops in that way, and it's a very safe, sacred container. It's a container where I'm very good at that. Everything else gets switched off, and all that we are doing is following the divine in every single moment, as close as we possibly can for the time that we're together. And I said to myself 2 years ago, all right, this is great. I know how to do this. I've built up these like psycho-spiritual muscles. I've built up my connection to the divine, my connection to my soul. I know my markers. I know what the divine sounds like. I know what my ego sounds like in a way that I had never, I mean, it's still a constant practice to get better and better and better and better at it. But to know when it's little Sabrina coming in there and when it's something higher coming in. And so after practicing and practicing and practicing that so much through my own practices, through day-to-day life, through work with my partner, through facilitating what I facilitate, through creating online workshops, through all of that, obviously I'm practicing a lot of the time. And decided 2 years ago, okay, this is coming into all of my life. The way that I follow the divine, follow Shakti, the way that I listen, the way that I trust, the way that I act, I'm going to do that in every aspect of my life. Joe, this is an intense prayer.
But I love that. It's funny you say that doesn't feel that practical, but to me, actually, that's really practical. Like, how can I do this in every moment and just surrender and trust and feel guided that I will know what the right thing to do is next? I mean, that's certainly something I'm aiming for. Not everybody, as you say, wants that. People need a bit more like control, or I need to see where I'm going. But that feels really good to me. It feels really good to me. I love that.
Good. Oh, I'm glad that it's, I mean, I could get even more practical. I think if you ask specific questions, I don't know that we necessarily need to, but it's pretty wild what happens in life when you start to live that way. It's wild what you have to let go of when you start to live from the soul, like soul truth, what you have to let go of, you know, all the little safety and security things that that has to go. All of the little, the old family patternings, that all gets the light gets shown on that, like, oh, well, you're actually not making this decision from the highest place. You're actually just operating from a family pattern that's been instilled in you for 30 plus years. And your whole family has probably been doing it for generations upon generations. Like, the light gets shown on all of these places. And to me, that's evolution. To me, that's walking a deep path to the embodiment of the divine. That's walking toward, I mean, we can say enlightenment or waking up or whatever words we're using these days. But for me, that's my path. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. That to me, if nobody else hears what you just said and takes wisdom from it, that for me was like beautiful reminder of what's possible through this. So
I'm so glad. I'm good. I'm so glad you said the word practical. I'm like, I don't know how practical this is, but
in a way it is. And a lot of people have sort of spoken actually of being, you know, in sort of constant communication with the divine. Where do I go now? Or the universe, or whatever word they happen to use. But maybe practical will come out in this last question, which is, and you have given some advice in the conversation already, but let's just round it up with any advice you would share with someone feeling, you know, that curiosity is winning over contempt here and they are ready to dip their toe in. What advice would you have to them?
Yeah, the one of the biggest things that I can share is trust you. Trust those inner callings. Trust what's resonating with you. Trust, it's like that deep inner wisdom. Start to feel into that. And it might be really, really quiet at the start, or it might just show up as like goosebumps on your skin, or it might show up as like that gut feel, where your stomach kind of churns a little bit when it's a no. However it starts to show up, start to really, really, really follow that. This is not a mental, logical, left brain, let me weigh out the pros and cons kind of a path or thing when we start to make these decisions. And those who are just starting on the path, feel into what's calling you. What teachers do you resonate with? Don't feel like you have to resonate with me or with another teacher or with a certain path or a certain tradition. There are a lot of traditions that I feel hold so much magic and so much wisdom, but they're just not my path. They're just, they hold nothing for me personally, but I see others walking that path and waking up and coming closer and closer and closer to the divine and their soul and the embodiment of the divine. And so really trusting your unique path, right? It goes back to that, don't judge, don't compare, just trust and follow who's resonating, what path is resonating, what practices. And sometimes, I'm just going to like throw a wrench in this whole thing. Sometimes the things that we're the most scared of are actually the ones that are calling us. So sometimes the practices that we're like the most resistant to, or the workshop that we're like, oh no, that's actually the best place that you could be. So this is deep listening. So this is deep listening beyond small self, beyond little fears, because there's a lot of fear that comes around waking up. There's a lot of fear that comes around stepping into our wholeness. There's a lot of fear that comes around letting go of the ego way of being and stepping into a more soulful way of being. So it becomes, the ego becomes kind of servant to the soul. That's a scary path, and a lot of the fears come up. So starting to learn your markers, learn when it's little self just kicking up a little fear, and when it's a higher calling. So starting to learn, just know thyself, be very observant and be compassionate. That's the other thing. Be so compassionate and so gentle with yourself on this path. It's not a beating self up because you didn't do 20 minutes of meditation yesterday. It's more just trust and follow and flow and move and let there be love and let there be grace and let there be compassion for all the stumbles, because we all stumble all of the time. And then we just get back up, get back on track, and then you'll stumble again, and just know that that's it.
Yes. Oh, yes, to all of that. And it's interesting you say about this whole, this trusting divine, where the ego becomes like the servant to the divine, this higher knowing, and how scary that can be. And actually, I've even, in the course of putting this together, I've been really experiencing like just waves of sadness, and I'm just sort of releasing it, going, you know what? That's just letting go of another piece of me, and or not, a part that wasn't aligned with this highest, where I want to go. And that awareness that, like, what is this waves of sadness? What does that actually mean? Why am I feeling that? Yeah. That's built up, that muscle where you can actually go in and go, okay, I'll just be with that, and that's okay. And just, you're so right about that. You mentioned it earlier, that it kind of is a muscle, and or a habit, or as you start following those tweaks that you're getting from your body and just giving yourself time to learn them, it becomes easier to go, oh, okay, there's something here for me. I'm definitely trusting this is where I got to go. It's easier, or you can tune into it quicker.
Absolutely. It gets so much easier, right? It's the building of, and the inner wiring shifts. Yes. So it's the muscles get stronger, the psycho-spiritual muscles get stronger, the soul connection, how the soul communicates, it starts to communicate very loudly. It's so clear. We're not questioning it. And all of that changes, and it gets so much easier and so much easier and so much easier. But it's literally just one step in front of the other. Just take a step, and then take another step, and that's it.
Thank you.
Can I share one thing?
Oh, please.
Can I just share one tiny little thing that I'm feeling about your path? And I just want to say that it's really beautiful for everyone here who's witnessing you and witnessing this part of your journey, is that we actually get to like watch you as an example, stepping into your path and what you're called to do, and doing something that is aligned with your soul. And it's not only serving others, but it's also waking you up and shifting you and opening you up. And we get to watch and witness the very thing that you're bringing out into the world. So I just want to point that out, woman, because it's huge and it feels amazing. And just kudos to you, and so much gratitude for what you're doing and having invited me to be a part of this. It's beautiful, and I'm excited to share it with all the women of rewilding in our community.
Oh, I'm so grateful that, because the way you became part of this was somebody else that I randomly met at a choir dance evening saying, you should totally ask this person. And so the way this has unfolded is just, I'm just trusting it. I'm being guided. Yeah. And, you know, people are saying, yes, I'd love to be involved. And thank you for that, pointing that out, because that is this, like, I feel like the me 6 months ago wouldn't have done this, you know, the shifts that have happened over the last 6 months for me. And as you say, it's, you know, there is so much wisdom and lessons and all the good stuff in this for me. And your gorgeous line, know thyself, like one of the speakers has got that tattooed across her body right now. You see it in her photo like that. I'm like, there we go. She's awesome, Liv. We talked to her the other day. So having felt you, having seen you, having got the energy of you as a person through this conversation, tell people who are watching, please, how they can find out some more about you and what you do.
The easiest, best thing to do is just go to our website, rewildingforwomen.com. There's in-person events that you can come to, live events you can come to. We do a lot of online stuff. We have this beautiful Facebook group that I love, and that's absolutely open to everyone. That's Rewilding for Women. We do live circles and live workshop podcasts. We record all of our podcasts there live. So those are just great places to start. There's lots of beautiful free resources on the website, beautiful free resources in that Facebook group. And that, to me, would probably be the best place to start, to just touch in and to feel. Just to feel.
Yeah. Just take that curiosity step one little step closer and look at the website and then go, this is so good. I don't know. Yes, maybe. Yeah. Okay. I'll stay a bit longer. Awesome. Thank you so much for being with me today. I'm so grateful to have you. I'm so grateful for your energy and everything that you've shared. There was so much great tips and wisdom and advice and the freedom of how different the paths can be. I loved hearing about your story. So thank you so much for being here, having me. I feel like
thank you for having me, Jo. It was amazing. Really, really, truly amazing. And I'm grateful for what you're doing.
Thank you. And we're out.